Hey, if you're just checking out the video for the first time, we do a recap of the episode just to make sure everyone's on the same page, especially since it's a 5-hour episode. You might miss a detail here or there. And then we peel that replay out, or that recap out, as a separate video. So if you're watching just the recap, you can click on the link in the episode description and see our full breakdown. And heck, if you don't have any friends who watch Critical Role, which is the case for me and Will, and you want to join in on the conversation, go to our YouTube channel, jump into the video, and leave a comment and let us know what you thought of the episode. We'd love to engage with you and interact with you. So having said that, let's talk about what happened on episode 2 of Exandria Unlimited, Calamity. This one was called, I think, Bitterness and Dread. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, like Will and I joked, I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. So much lore in this episode, and so I'll try to summarize where I can. But the episode opens up with Sarah basically looking over the body of this cultist and the cracked mirror nearby that Vespin Chloris did the jump scare, this awesome moment in the previous episode. And he inspects the Hopendod, which is like the automaton steward, sort of the lowest level of what we've seen so far of automatons. And something odd is, as he opens up, he doesn't know a lot about automatons, but as he opens it up, he's expecting to see like an engine or some kind of machinery that implies how it works. And instead he finds basically nothing. The inner workings are missing. It'd be like opening a car hood and the engine's not there. So this naturally strikes him as odd. He gets a ping on his sending stone in his pocket, and it's his son who's phoning in to say that his daughter is sneaking out and going to one of these replenishment parties. It's a really great scene. They have a touching moment where Seraph says, "Hey, I love you, son." Me being the cynic, I'm like, oh no, one of these guys is dying for sure. The son asks, "Hey, when's mom going to be home?" And Sarah's like, as you know, she's an important scientist, hopefully soon. So other than that, and there's a lot of cuts to different party members during this first half, by the way. The scene cuts over to Nidus, who is heading back over to the Golden Scythe, where these automatons are created. And he goes to one of his proteges, Alessander, who's sort of enjoying the party and is wearing this candle on his hat, and basically says to Alessander, "Hey, I need 4 automaton stat." And Alessander's like, "Well, it's the replenishment. We can't spare that at all. Like, everything's accounted for." And he's like, "No, like, this is an emergency. I need them now. Give me..." Basically, like, "You know what I need." And Alessander's like, "You mean you want the taxmen?" Ooh. And there's this really cool moment, like, of tension across the cast. Who's like, "The taxmen? That sounds that can't be good, right?" And basically he brings out these 4 hulking steel golems that have these swords on their back that are just incredible. And Alessander mentions, like, these were intended for the month of the replenishment. They're supposed to be in mint condition, and Nidus basically gives his word and says, "I'll have them back in mint condition. You don't have to worry about that." So he takes a porter over to the Meridian Labyrinth, where Laren is at the heart of Avalier. It's these series of engines that are whirring and moving, and there's this large machine with this swinging pendulum, and she is basically doing some final tests to activate a device, an engine that she's been building and working on for some time. Nidus arrives with these golems who basically assist in getting everything in place, and she takes the remains of the solar bow and places it in the machine. It fills with golden energy. And as this happens, as she basically activates the machine, one of the ley lines of Exandria becomes visible and begins flowing through the room, flowing through them. Nidus has this awesome moment of like covering his eyes and just the awe of all of it. And something of interest is Laren is holding this small, think of it as like a toy boat, but this small ley rudder that lifts and then begins to fade and disappears and goes away. And the question becomes, where did it go to? And Laren basically smiles, is almost in tears. She's clutching the locket of Evandrin that Evandrin had given her a long time ago, and basically says, implying to Evandrin, it was worth it. Like, our sacrifices were worth it. And it's very much an implication that something she did in working with Evandrin caused Evandrin's death. It's a very big moment. She also turns to Nidus and basically says, Now, because of this, it's not going to be a question of where Avalier goes on Exandria next, but where across the planes of existence, implying that now they can travel across anywhere, which is pretty incredible. There's only one small issue. There is a sensor, a large alarm that goes off, basically letting them know that 8% of Avalier's power has been used. And she's like, how could this have happened? And most of this power has come from a nearby engine called the Arboreal Calyx. This is where the lore can get a bit fuzzy, so hang in with me for a second. There's an engine separate to the engine she's been using. The engine she's been using is called the Astral Layrite. It's what she's built to now allow them to travel planes of existence. There's a separate machine that no one really knows much about called the Arboreal Calyx, and like the instruction manual, so to speak, basically says to leave it alone, just keep it operational, don't mess with it. Brennan basically does a massive lore dump explaining that the Arboreal Calyx was put into place 120 years ago, directly after the last apogee solstice, where a certain raven-haired woman ascended to divinity. So there's some interesting connection there, and that the tree was put into place as in part because of something called the Drashari Tithe. The explanation here was that when Avalier 240 years ago, so 2 apogee solstices ago, when Avalier was cast to the sky, what caused them to be able to do that were the mages of Avalier essentially found this mountain called Mount Yagora, where 2 of the prime deities had defeated the primordials, or like 2 really important primordials or betrayer gods. I can't remember the details. And this mountain is full of brimstone. It's teeming with brimstone. And so they're like, let's take this mountain. It's got incredible power and let's use it. Well, the druids of that area who were protecting the area, they lived in this village called Turamunda. They basically were like, no, you can't take our mountain. And they're like, hey, well, how about we take the mountain, and then every 120 years, as a thank you or what we owe to you, we will give you all of the ether and energy that we store up, and it will be the replenishment.
Yeah, every 7 years, though. It's every time the cities come back together.
Correct, right. So Cathmora is that original druidic city. Avalier is the city that gets cast to the sky because of the brimstone. And this becomes known as the Drashari Tithe, and also known as the Pact of Crown and Throne. Crown being Avalier, throne being Cathmora. And so it's always been portrayed as this very like generous, altruistic event, but actually it's basically a, hey, you owe this to us. And so that's why the replenishment happens. So a lot of information there, a lot of details. But basically, we know that this Arboreal Calyx is here. And Laren is basically like, I need to figure out why it's sucking up so much energy, because I need that energy to take Avalier into the next plane of existence. Also, what ends up happening is Xerxes shows up. He stopped in at the Golden Scythe, talked to Alessander, who basically was like, all right, Nidus is over at the Meridian Labyrinth with Laren. And Nidus is separately on the side like, how come no one can keep a secret in the city? Xerxes flies off on his griffin, not before Alessander says there's something you need to know, but he's out. He's gone. He doesn't get to hear it. And in arriving at the Meridian Labyrinth, Xerxes doesn't notice Laren clutching the pendant of Evandrin, but basically tells Laren, I'm here for you, whatever you need. And Brennan, the slimy DM he is, basically says, hey, you remember a previous first night saying the same things, Evandrin having told you those same things. So there's definitely this implication that Laren is hiding something about Evandrin and their relationship. The Ring of Brass gets back together. Laren shares the news. There's this really interesting back and forth, sort of this challenging conversation of like, why would we want to go to another plane of existence? And Laren and Nidus basically say, why not? Like, the only thing that makes the gods what they are is that they get to live in these other planes. If we go there, then they're like us. Like, we basically ascend to godhood. And there's more I want to say about that in our post recap, Will, just in terms of some implications that were really cool with that conversation.
We got a lot to talk about.
They talk again, and also from this conversation, they talk about how this has to happen now because it's the apogee solstice. Patia remembers, there's something really special about the apogee solstice. In fact, when I was a little girl, that same woman with the raven hair, I remember her sharing about how special the apogee solstice was. But you know what? No one can really remember her name, especially since she ascended to divinity. So they know this is their only chance. Laren's like, I have to figure this out now. But before they go on from there, they decide, let's look at the cultist's body. So they go in, they do a medicine check, or actually a religion check. Xerxes rolls a natural 20 on the cultist's body. And they basically are told by Britain that this was someone who only 2 weeks ago became a cleric of a betrayer god. His body's riddled with tumors and growths. And the party feels a bit of a pity for this person who's been through something extremely horrific and miserable, becoming the servant of this betrayer god. And they say, wow, 2 weeks ago, that's when Vespin Chloris completed his ritual. Could Vespin be a betrayer god? We don't know. And Laren's kind of, not Laren, Patia's like, well, how did this person get in here? So she pulls out her scrying orb, which is like a security camera, and looks at the hallway outside the room and sees this Hobmadad walking down the hallway and disappearing into this room. And it's implied that it's the cultist who has been using Disguise Self. They go back even farther and they see that this Hobmadad arrived with the Dean of the Throne of Necromancy, Dean Lucretia Hollow, who is also the same person who originally invited Pervon Sol, the champion of the Raven Queen, basically, and who also challenged and insulted him to basically say, you're hiding something from us. But they see her arriving with this Hobmadad. And so there's some closer link there. Okay, that's the first half, and then we go to break. I hope I covered all that stuff okay. Will, why don't you take the second half, which has just as many, maybe more lore stuff to it.
Alrighty, so we pick back up, and like Blake said, Dean Lucretia Hollow came in with this Hobmadad that was in fact the disguised cultist, and the Hobmadad cultist was carrying a gift. Like, people brought gifts to this event, and they noticed that it placed the gift on the table with all the other gifts. So their first order of business is, let's go see what the hell that cultist brought in disguised as a gift. So they make their way over there, and I believe probably Patia, but somebody casts detect magic, and there's no magical essence coming from it, but they find the gift. She opens it up, and inside is a small vial and a note. And the note says, when the time comes, this will be the easier way out. All things end, lives, stories, even ages. And the implication is that this vial is full of poison. So it's like, hey, just kill yourself, basically. That'll be
it's like a cyanide pill, basically. Like,
like that'll be the easier way out. Patia shares this with everybody else. Laren takes the vial, immediately smashes it on the floor, and they're like, okay, what the hell is going on here? So Patia immediately tries to scry on Lucretia Hollow to figure out where she is, but she is unable to, and they quickly remember that all of these like powerful, influential mages and wizards wear this thing called a mind shielding ring, which basically prevents them from being scryed on. So they're like, okay, where did we last see her? And they realize they last saw her talking to Madara Glyph, who is still at the party. So they rush over and approach Madara. And quickly they find out that Madara has had their memory modified for some reason. So Patia casts Detect Thoughts and kind of dives into Madara's mind to try to figure out what happened here. And basically what they piece together is that Lucretia cast invisibility on herself and then struck out to go follow Pervon Sol as he was leaving. And another man, let me make sure I'm right on this name here. Magister Cormorant. He cast this modified memory spell on Madara.
Glyph.
Yeah. And then kind of hastily made his leave. And what they saw is that Lucretia Hollow, following Pervon Sol, was going out to potentially kill him. Like she was preparing to cast some sort of like bad spell on Pervon, but was stopped when Xerxes and Loquacious approached Pervon during last week's episode when they were just confronting him and asking him information. So because Pervon was no longer alone, Lucretia did not, attempt whatever she was going to attempt and was foiled in that moment. So they're like, okay, what's going on here? And in this moment, the party basically kind of splits up to do different things. So Laren and Patia decide to go find this Magister Cormorant, maybe get some answers from him. Meanwhile, Loquacious and Sarah decide to head back to the Herald's Tome, which is where Loquacious works, in order to kind of just consult the records that they have on Vespin, see what they can find out. And finally, Xerxes and Nidus are going to go check out the Hall of Prophecy, the Hall of the Oracles, and figure out, like, why are they closed? Like, this is very weird. So first and foremost, we got Sarah and Loquacious heading to the Herald's Tome. They do their investigation, and they essentially land on this these files from a reporter named Elena Tuvaris. And there's one interview in particular with Vespin about the matron's ritual. And Vespin is quoted as saying, "Why would you want to remove a benevolent force from the world? It'd be much better to dethrone something nefarious." And then there's another piece of information they find, which is this like video recording of an old interview. And in the background of this interview, Vespin, Chloris, Lucretia Hollow, and Loris of the Weaver's Mask are all talking. And Sarah is able to read Vespin's lips due to the angle that there is. And he basically picks up some information about the Tree of Names. And so then both Sarah and Loquacious are like, what is a Tree of Names? That like kind of sounds familiar. And with a super high roll from Travis, in addition to Loquacious giving him inspiration, he is able to recall that the Tree of Names is this central like artifact of Avalier, something that needs to be eternally guarded. It's not talked about much, but it was protected 120 years ago by the arboreal calyx, which was built around it.
Right.
And forgot to mention that basically all of the Circle of Brass, that they've split up, but they have a telepathic bond that Paisha has like enabled, so they're all still able to communicate with each other. And so Sarah fills in everybody else about this Tree of Names and what he remembers about it. And Evandrin brings up, yeah, there was some tree in my dream, you know, that I told you guys are about, with Evandrin. And then Sarah's like, Evandrin. And he notices there is, in this reporter's files, there is like a file on Evandrin, but it's empty. So Sarah asks Loquacious, like, who has access to this? Like, why would this be gone? And Loquacious is like, she doesn't work here anymore. You know, I don't really know what she's doing. I'm not sure why it's gone. We have, you know, other reporters did stuff on Evandrin. You can check their files. I'm sure they're there. And Brendan has him rolls like a deception check, and not like that exact specific moment, but just like in this conversation. And he rolls super high, so Sarah doesn't register.
Yeah, 31, I think.
Yeah. So then we cut to the Magisterium, which is where Laren and Paisha are going to confront this Magister Cormorant. So they walk in, they make their way to his office, and it's locked. So Laren casts Summon Construct and basically animates one of these like enormous statues nearby, and the statue just busts in through the office door. It's empty, the lights are off, but Paisha turns them on, and she, I think, casts Detect Magic and realizes that there is something being like hidden in this room. And basically, initiative is rolled, and we have a really quick combat. Laren essentially casts Fireball. Still can't see, but just, you know, with a general idea and with the AoE of Fireball, just casts it. Does hit, does a ton of damage, and it breaks Magister Cormorant's concentration on his invisibility spell, so he's now visible. And so now the arcane sentry that she animated runs over and like punches him twice, and he just dies, and combat's over. And they're like, oh, okay. And so they quickly like investigate the room, see what they can find. And they do find that he was very interested in Laren's work, the Architect Arcane. And they also find a letter about the arboreal calyx. And the letter basically says, like, hey, we can't tell you what its purpose is. We don't trust the wizards of Avalier to no limitation. They always, you know, seek higher and higher. If the wizards knew the true nature of this tree, they would only see opportunity. Simply tend to the tree and do not ask about it again. And the letter is signed by the head druid of the Gaudashari. So next we cut
which is the druidic city that was protecting Mount Yagora.
Right, right. So basically, the Cathmore are part of the two. At least I assume.
Yeah, right.
So next we cut to the Hall of Oracles, where Xerxes and Nidus are. They make their way in.
I was thinking of Xerxes being like, how dead is he? He's like,
yeah, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do anything.
All right, anyway, sorry, continue. This is where it gets real good.
So they go to the Hall of Oracles, and there they see Sophira, who is a young woman and apparently knows Xerxes really well, and a bunch of the Archsept guards, so like the guards of like the main 7 mages that are in charge of everything, and they're like, hey, why is this place closed? And with some insight checks, they basically see that she's like very troubled and has been crying, and basically tells them that the Archsept guards here have been tasked by Loris of the Weaver's Mask to not allow anyone in. And with a super high deception roll, Nidus is like, "Oh yeah, Loris said we could come in. we're here on replenishment business for him."
And she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah,
yeah, she buys
come
it.
on in."
They're like, "Yeah, okay, well, perfect." So, and like I said, Xerxes and Sophira have some sort of previous relationship. So he's like, "Hey, I can tell you're upset. Like, you can tell me anything. Like, I'm here to help." And she's like, "Okay, come with me." And she's like, "I'm glad Loris sent you. Like, he only took over yesterday after Volusia broke her staff and denounced magic forever." And they're like, "Whoa." And who Volusia is, she's also a member of the Ring of Gold, and basically like Loris's counterpart. They are both the apprentices of Aladrin, who is one of the 7.
Right.
So she tells them that, hey, about 2 weeks ago, Oracle started going crazy, speaking false prophecies. It all started with this one named Carwin, and then as other people started to try to like help her, they too went mad. And now it's basically down to just me. And they're like, whoa. And is this what caused Volusia to renounce everything? And she says, I don't really know. I just heard her and Loris arguing. And she said, if these gifts harm us, then we should not accept them. And then, she basically broke her staff and said, I'm out. So they're approaching this bedroom where Carwin, the original one who went mad, is being held. And Sophira's like, hey, it's really better if just one person goes in there at a time. Just trust me, basically. And so Xerxes is like, okay, yeah, I'll go in there. And as they're making their way there, Nidus is like, can you show me these false prophecies that she was talking about? And Sophira's like, okay, yeah. So that's what they go and do while Xerxes comes into this room. And he notices as he approaches through like this bathhouse with a bunch of mirrors, there's like cracks all in them. So he goes in and he sees Carwin, this woman, laying on a bed with these like white runic symbols in a circle around the bed. And I don't know if it's like the wall behind her, as in like the headboard, or the opposite wall.
I think it's the opposite wall,
Okay.
like a decoration kind of thing, though, like to set the room ambience.
Yeah. So on the opposite wall, then there's almost like this waterfall, kind of a cascade of water kind of pouring down. And in the reflection, he can, the water is reflecting the room. So in the reflection, there's also a bed and someone in it, although it is not Carwin. It is instead this red-horned figure, the same one Xerxes recognizes from his dream in episode 1, except they're now like humanoid size. And Xerxes does cast like divine presence or something, and he notices that Carwin has a slight celestial ping, but it is completely overshadowed by this massive fiendish ping coming from that reflection. So Xerxes kind of like walks into it and finds himself now in another time, another realm, as Brennan describes it, and is now face to face with this red-horned figure that is like bleeding and appears to be dying in this bed. And Xerxes is like, show yourself. And the creature responds like, I can't, I'm too weak. And Xerxes is like, you know me. And the creature replies, I do know you. I know you well. You saved me. And he kind of approaches, and you can tell Xerxes is like, he's like a good guy. He like wants to help this grievously injured thing. And it tells him like, hey, it's okay. I can't die. I'm not in danger. It just hurts. You saved me before the Dawnfather could destroy me. And Xerxes asks, who are you? And they respond, betrayer, sinner, most unclean. I am the Lord of the Hells. And then there's basically this massive kind of lore dump in this scene where the Lord of Hells explains that when the gods first arrived here, they were all like with the primordials and this energy of the world. They all came and wanted to offer their own gifts and mold this magic. And they just one by one were offering gifts to the world. And the Lord of Hells, Asmodeus, as we come to find out, said he was one of the ones kind of late to arrive to the table. And all of the good gifts had already been offered, already been made, so there wasn't much left, and he kind of had to take the scraps, had to take what he was given. And as they're talking, Xerxes realizes that this man looks like Evandrin, And the Lord of Hells explains that, yeah, I was the most beautiful of them all, and I appear to mortals as who they find most beautiful. Um, and he basically starts breaking down, being like, no one has shown me kindness like in so long. And he kind of just like starts sobbing and explaining more about how, the gifts all were offered by the prime deities. So when he showed up and these other betrayer gods showed up, there wasn't much left. So they had to make the gifts he offered were like lies and betrayal in order to be the other side of the coin,
accentuate like the value of honesty and truth, like to make these good things even better. He created these other things like lying and deception to emphasize the goodness of those things.
Exactly. And, he thought that it would make the earlier work matter more. But as time passed, mortals called his gifts evil and wicked and cursed him, and none said prayers in his name. So Asmodeus and these other betrayer gods were basically already hated. And then the prime deities kept giving more and more gifts to their creations, which basically just widened the gap even more. And again, the primordials were on this world before any of these deities came, and with each gift that the gods would give the mortals, they were kind of stepping on the primordials' toes more and more. And it eventually rose to a boiling point where the primordials rose against the prime deities, and the betrayer gods sided with the primordials because that was who they originally like made a deal with. And he has this big moment of saying like, and we were called the betrayers, like they were just honoring their original agreement with the primordials. So after all that lore is kind of dropped, Xerxes is basically begs Asmodeus to be like, do not forget me if you like fully break free from here. Do not turn your pain on your children. Like, let us help you, and we will, make those who did this to you pay. And Asmodeus is like, not for all the ages of the world will I ever forget you. I am I am the father of lies, like, the Lord of Hell. I know when someone is lying, and I can see people's faults. And your fault is that you are too trusting, and you are being lied to, and not by any god. So Xerxes is like, okay. And he kind of looks back through the portal from whence he came, and he sees his like crumpled body on the floor and realizes that he's kind of having like an oracle-esque vision in this moment. And he's like, all right, I got to take my leave soon. But before he leaves, he asks, why was Evandrin's spirit in that dream with the tree? And Asmodeus says, it's because your connection to him, his spirit must have somehow been near. And they have a quick conversation about Evandrin, and he's like, did you ever try to bring him back? And Xerxes says, I tried to stop what happened to him, but I couldn't. He was afflicted by this illness beyond my reach. I tried everything. And Asmodeus says, there are lots of ways for diseases, illnesses, and stuff to be stopped. And it's kind of implying that like it's kind of strange that he wasn't able to be saved. And again, reference that he's being lied to. Then he says, be careful. There are many lies in the city you call home. And Asmodeus casts protection from good and evil on Xerxes and says, this will protect you from Fae, Fiend, and Celestial, including myself. There's poison in your city, and you know the shape of it. Xerxes basically nods, steps back through the portal, but gives a final last word of, come find me. So then we cut back to Nidus and Sapphira, and Sapphira is showing Nidus this prophecy. And the prophecy was, the stars are leaving us, our hands cannot reach the limbs of the tree, can no longer scribe the name of deliverance. We will soon be as broken as our promise. Avalier shall fall, all shall fall, and from our folly will the hands that forge the world banish themselves from the broken things that they have made. And Nidus is like, oh yeah, okay, let's go ahead and continue assuming that that's false. And something must have gone wrong because this couldn't possibly happen, right? And in that moment, Laren gets a ping on her wrist cell phone device, and it's Akami Ro, who is stating that everything's going swimmingly with the conjunction of the two cities. They are now above Kath Moira, and their descent has begun. Akami says, I'm going to stay here in the engine room, just make sure nothing goes wrong. And like mid-sentence, she gets like cut off by this gurgling noise, and then the transmission ends. And so the various groups are all like, again, they have this telepathic bond, are like, oh shit, let's go. So everyone convenes toward the engine room. They convene in the Dawn Siege, or Dawn's Ledge, which is near there. And they run into Lucretia Hollow, and she's like, "Ah, the Ring of Brass," and that's where the episode ends. Oh, there's a lot. Sorry, I tried to go through it,
bro. So if you want to know our reactions, check the link below. Check out the whole video. We want to know your reactions to what the freaking crap just happened in this episode. Let us know your thoughts.